Right, an absolutely enormous amount has happened in Formula One in the last week, and I'm joined this week by an expert in his field, Formula One journalist from the race podcast, Edd Straw. He and I were catching up for all things Red Bull and Formula One last week, but so much has happened, so Ed's rejoined me to talk about kind of the most seismic news I think we've had in Formula One for a while. Do you remember where you were when you heard the news of Christian Horner's sacking?
It did come as a complete surprise in terms of just timing and the fact that it happened, and it happened so suddenly, because normally you do get whispers about this sort of thing. Although it's been an ongoing topic for a good 18 months in terms of the general political machinations within Red Bull, it did somewhat blindside me and a lot of people in F1. As far as I know, Horner found out basically on the Tuesday afternoon, and then the world found out Wednesday morning, and found out a little bit later than it might have done because he was so keen to go to the factory to address everyone. So that slowed it down. So yeah, in that regard, a complete surprise. The only caveat I'll put on that is it was clear, because of the political landscape there, that at some point probably something had to give there. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't sat there on that day thinking, oh, something's going to happen. I'd have never thought that would happen in that gap between the previous race and Spa. So, yeah.
Do you see Christian Horner popping up on the grid somewhere next year? I know there've been talk, or the rumour mill goes into overdrive immediately in this situation with an Alpine or a Ferrari or whatever. I wonder what your view is on that.
I'd be very surprised if he doesn't turn up again in F1. The exact timeline isn't entirely clear. Obviously, he's made it clear that his contract's still there, so he's removed from operational involvement. So they'll have to come up with some kind of agreement on the contract, which runs.
Surely that's just the lawyers thrashing things out, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, he's not going to be sat on gardening leave forever. They'll find a way to have a clean break, and it'll be the usual thing, won't it? Both sides will want a clean break. The side that's paying will want to pay as little as possible. The side that's getting paid will want to be paid as much as possible. That's just how these things work in any walk of life. But what Christian Horner, I'm sure, will be looking at is how he can get back in with what would be, I think, his own team, as in he'd want something that he's got a stake in. And the most logical pathway to that could be something with Alpine. He's got a decent relationship with Fabio Briatore as well. Maybe there's a way to do some kind of a buyout of Alpine. Obviously, Horner's got decent resources, but he's not a multi-billionaire or anything, so he couldn't just drop money in it. But he could put together something, particularly with collaboration with Briatore, I think, to maybe make that team his own. And he's always in the back of his mind been someone who's had little exit strategies for Red Bull, just in case Red Bull one day pulled out. There are always little schemes of like, well, we could, with this person, do a management buyout or whatever, a little bit like what happened with the Brawn thing when Honda pulled out and they did a slightly less calculated management buyout. So he's always had that in mind. So I suspect that will be Horner's top objective. He will want not just to be a team boss of a team, not a hired gun. He'll want it to be his team in some way, shape or form. And Alpine seems the most obvious way to achieve that. There's been nothing to say that's happening, but that seems a logical way to look. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Ferrari team principle is something that's been talked about. I don't believe Horner was particularly keen on that. They did speak to him a few years ago about it. Obviously, he now doesn't have Red Bull Racing, so
might be different now. Yeah,
exactly. It might be different, but I still think he would favour having a team that is his. And Ferrari, obviously, that will never happen. And also the question at Ferrari is whether you actually get to do things the way you want to.
Yeah.
Obviously, to my knowledge, he's not an Italian speaker, so that creates some challenges. So I suspect it's more likely that he'll try and do something with taking control of a team and either immediately or gradually getting a good stake in it, so it's absolutely his team. I suspect that he'd also like to go in and just show Red Bull what he can do, and his point, there'll be some ego in it as well, but he knows how to build up a Formula One team. So I think if you're anybody who wants to get involved in Formula One, or you're anybody who needs a team boss, you would call Christian Horner pretty much, wouldn't you? Because he's got the expertise, because regardless of all the other stuff that's gone on, we know that in sport, if people are very good at what they do, people will want them to do things. And so I imagine he'll have no shortage of offers, and his name will open doors in terms of potential partners, because I suspect he'll want something a little bit like what Toto Wolff's got at Mercedes. Mercedes has three equal owners. Toto Wolff's one of them, and Mercedes is another, and then Ineos, Jim Ratcliffe is the other. So that seems to me the kind of model I think Horner would see as the minimum, if you like, where he's kind of a demonstrable owner. It's his team, not just the team he works for.
And what about Max Verstappen? More likely to stay at Red Bull next season as a result, or does it not change too much?
It's a really interesting question because my first reaction was that, yes, it would mean he's much more likely to stay. But then when you start to consider it a little bit more broadly, I am not completely sure Red Bull on the corporate side think that Verstappen is worth bending over backwards to all degrees on, in terms of paying insane amounts of money and giving him minimal marketing, etc., which Red Bull have done. I wouldn't be totally surprised if there's an element there that might be a little bit more willing to let him go than Horner would have been, which I think is a risk because Verstappen is an all-time great. There aren't many of those around. So that's why you want to keep a driver like Verstappen. That's why any other team would want him. So it's interesting to say, because obviously strategically the logical thing to do would probably be wait, see how things pan out with the power units in 26 and then move for 27 to the best possible place. But Verstappen might also look at it and say, well, not much has changed. Yes, there was clearly a problem with Christian Horner, particularly on the Jos Verstappen side, but there were concerns with other things. I think there was a slight shattering of confidence of the technical leadership of Pierre Vacher, for example. That's still the same. So I think Verstappen will be looking to see what's changing, but I don't think it's quite as simple as what might have looked, what it kind of looked like initially, that the whole Verstappen thing had triggered it. I think that's one part of it, and I'm still not sure what Max Verstappen would do. He might just think, oh, forget this, I'm going to go off and sign for Mercedes. And of course, he'll have been given the hard sell on the Mercedes side. He'll have seen plenty of data and evidence of how good their power unit is going to be as well. And any team will give him the hard sell. So he's probably got quite a lot of information there about what's going on, because all drivers keep in touch with all credible alternative teams. So I'm sure there's lots of knowledge and understanding for him to make his decision on. So that's still, that Mercedes move, I think, is probably still possible, but I'd still
veer on the side of staying for another season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm thinking. But this is very much a live issue that could be swung either way by a number of things. But I think whatever happens, it's going to happen quite soon, because this can't be dragged out for much longer. So we're getting into the end game now.
Laurent Mekies, obviously, he's done a good job at racing bulls, but it's not a like for like replacement, is it? He's a very different kind of leader.
No, not at all. It was a bit of a surprise, actually, when they announced it, because obviously Horner, everyone knows him as team principal. He's CEO, is his official job title, and he's CEO and team principal. And when they announced Laurent Mekies, who was the Racing Bulls team principal, they announced him as CEO and presumably team principal. But for me, while Horner could be both of those things, the CEO of the wider company and team principal, Mekies is a little bit different. His setup at Racing Bulls was he was the team principal, very much overseeing the racing, technical side, that kind of thing, the core racing side. And he had Peter Bayer there as CEO, who looked at the broader business. So Mekies isn't like for like, but he can replace that Christian Horner racing and technical side. They haven't said this, but I would expect somebody on the business side to come in, potentially from the Red Bull corporate side, to pick up a lot of those sorts of things. So he ticks some of the Christian Horner boxes, but not so many of them. And that's not to criticise Mekies, because it's rare in Formula One now to have somebody like Horner who had such an overarching team principal CEO roles. But yeah, he's an intelligent guy, Mekies. He knows racing inside out. He's someone who works very, very well with the race team. So if anyone can pick up that baton of making it feel just like a normal, close-knit racing team, I think Laurent Mekies is the guy who can do it.
And in terms of the leadership, I got the sense that didn't really like having just one leader of everything, and everything led to Christian Horner. So inevitably someone will come from Austria to be CEO. We'll have Mekies as team principal, and he'll be a technical lead, also good people person. But there might be other figures that come in as well, and have more of a wider leadership group at the top of it going forward, with all reporting much more to Austria, I guess.
Yeah, that's the logical way to do it. And for that, you have to look all the way back to October 2022 and the loss of Dietrich Mateschitz, the co-founder of Red Bull. And he was the guy who was behind all of their motorsport activities. Mm-hmm. He absolutely drove it, and he pretty much let it run autonomously, which I would argue was for the best. Part of the reason for this is the wider political readjustment of Red Bull from, certainly on the F1 side, it was basically Mateschitz's plaything, into something wholly more corporate. And that's not always for the best when it comes to Formula One teams. So I'm very interested to see how that goes, because I would warn everyone on the Red Bull side, operate with a light touch and make sure you appoint the right people, because Formula One teams, they're not normal business units, if you like. They have to have a good level of autonomy to be fleet-footed enough to operate effectively. when it comes down to it, a lot of this is all about power bases and how much power you've got. And probably one of the reasons Horner has ended up being shoved out is he flew a bit too close to the sun in terms of having that personal power. But I think that was necessary. Mateschitz thought it was necessary for the whole thing to work. And the results over the past 2 decades bear that out.
The team done amazing things under him. Does that get derailed by this and this period of uncertainty?
It could go either way at this stage, because you can kind of pick your own narrative going forward, can't you? You could say, well, yes, it will destabilise everything that's made Red Bull racing good. There'll be too much corporate involvement. You've taken out the person that put everything together. But you could also say that things have been very slowly unravelling for a few years. There's been a lot going on over the past 18 months. And the only element of this that didn't surprise me is I felt that at some point something had to give. There had to be a readjustment, because when there was a bit of a battle last year and there was, could Christian Horner be pushed out? Could Helmut Marko be pushed out? What you ended up with was a kind of uneasy truce. And I think probably you needed something to stabilise all of that and find a way forward for the team, because with a lot of senior people leaving over the past few years, which Horner has now joined, there has been a slight loss of way. They're still winning races, but they're not able to win championships. So I think you could argue it could go either way, because although you do lose some of those things, the close-knitness of the team, etc., you can't say it's been going perfectly for the past 18 months. So there are things that need to be tackled. It could be a reset that's needed for the post-Mateschitz era. You need a new leadership structure. You need the right level of corporate involvement, which is a little bit, but not too much. And then it could be the next phase of rebuilding for this team. And in a few years' time, they get back on top again with their own power unit and it's a powerhouse again. That's the trend that you would expect it to follow. But it could go either way. But yeah, I don't think everything could stay as it was. There were too many unstable parts and different factions forming. And yeah, you can argue after something's happened, it was always inevitable Christian Horner would be pushed out by this. I don't think you'd said that 2 weeks ago. You just said, well, no, it could go either way. But this is the way that it's gone, and it's happened very suddenly.
Because there's lots of different moving parts to it. There's a relationship with Team Verstappen. There's possible Max to Mercedes. There's the relationship with Austria. There's results not being great on the track. And then suggestions of a slight frostening of relations with Chalem Udivaya, the other owner of Red Bull. What do you think has been the most central aspect that changed the dial and forced this to happen so suddenly?
I would say probably it's the struggles on track that's acted as the catalyst. I think it's fairly clear that Red Bull, the post-Dietrich Mateschitz Red Bull, so that's led by Mark Mateschitz, his son, wanted more control over the whole Red Bull F1 side of things. And it says a lot that actually when they announced it, it was Oliver Mintzlaff, who's the CEO corporate projects and investments, who was quoted as the Red Bull side. So that tells you they see this as a corporate project now, ultimately. So that's kind of one of the things. The poor results created an argument for doing it. Obviously, the general Verstappen situation added a little bit to that as well, a bit more instability. And I think probably the Austrian side saw their chance to move in. And there was evidence last year they were looking at making a change, and it was the Thai side that kind of stabilised things. It's a strange setup, Red Bull, in that the majority owner is the Thai side. They own 51% of it, but for a long time, they've given management control to Austria for most of the world. Basically, they have a little bit of regional control, but they've basically said to Austria, right, you're in charge of this. But when it comes to the really, really big decisions, there was a little bit there. But I think that the Thai side eventually realised, yeah, something's got to happen, and went with what Austria wanted to do to make this all more corporate. So there's a few little elements there. I think it's tempting to say it's all because of the Verstappen situation. And I think that's a kind of logical snap judgment almost. But I think there's a number of things there. Verstappen's part of it, results are part of it, the political situation is part of it. But I think this does not happen if Dietrich Mateschitz is still there in control.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you'd think if he was still alive and running, that Horner would still be going on as is. And perhaps there wouldn't be the fallout in relations as well, do you think?
Very likely, yeah. Because I think there's inevitably, it's fundamentally changed the way the Red Bull and the Austrian side works. It is just more corporate rather than one man having dominion over it. Obviously, Mateschitz had done so much to build it up, and a different relationship with the Thai side as well. So, I mean, I could be wrong. There's obviously all sorts of things have been going on there. The investigations of Horner last year, which are part of the tapestry, but definitely not the cause, as far as we know, of what's happened here. In fact, it's been said 100% it's about performance. That's sort of the thing that people in the know involved will stress. So yeah, there's a lot of elements here. It's a complicated one, which is why it makes it slightly difficult to be exactly sure what happens in the coming months.
And even with the performance aspect, you could perhaps talk about 2026, and maybe people were getting nervous that wasn't going in the direction. I know that's still early days developmentally.
Yeah, well, by all logic, you would expect Red Bull to struggle a little bit on the power unit side.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Christian Horner's legacy to the team, becoming a full works entity. They've done everything right in building up that power unit side in terms of the staff they brought in, the equipment. They've got everything they possibly need. But it just takes time to gel fully, doesn't it? You can be a few fractions of a percent off on everything and you're basically nowhere in Formula One. So the expectation is the power unit will be a bit of a weakness next year, but that's yet to be proven and tested. There are notional figures floating around about performance. The FIA keeps tabs on this. So there is sort of some gentle evidence that they're a little bit behind. And Christian Horner himself actually said at Silverstone in the Friday press conference, it'd be pretty embarrassing for the likes of Mercedes if Red Bull were ahead with the power unit. So that all feeds into it. I don't think, however, concerns about the power unit initially struggling a little bit were particularly part of this. The only thing that did is it probably said, well, there's going to be a little bit of a period of rebuilding, retrenchment, and perhaps therefore that all points to this is the time to make the change. So maybe that was a stitch in the tapestry, but not a central one.
So actually, Ed joined me in the studio last week for a mid-season review, and we had quite a chunk where we talked about Red Bull this season, your perceptions of, and obviously quite a lot happened in that period. So hence we've had to have a little revisit what's been a bonkers last 7 days really for that team. But we'll take you back now into our season review where Ed and I take stock of what's happening, not just for Red Bull, but across the grid, and look ahead to the rest of the season. So we're at halfway point of the season. Has it played out as you expected or not quite?
Broadly, I think, yeah, you'd say McLaren were favourites and they have performed as favourites, haven't they? I think we expected Red Bull to struggle a little bit. So they're kind of in the range of what we expect. So I guess Ferrari's the one that's not quite where they were expected to be after last.
Your expectation was that Ferrari would be closer to the front of the grid than they have been.
Absolutely, and that was the expectation inside the team as well. Remember, they almost won the Constructors' Championship last year. Charles Leclerc was the top point scorer after the summer break. So they were on a great upward trajectory, and it's all just fallen apart. They've not had a win this year. Do
you think that's changing, though? Like the last couple of races, have they seen a bit more competitive? I know Charles Leclerc had a terrible race in Silverstone, but Lewis looked competitive, whether it was just the home effect.
Yeah, it was okay. They had an upgrade in Austria to the floor, which seems to have helped a little bit, and we're expecting a suspension upgrade, a rear suspension. So that could be the second part of the step forward.
So where is that coming for Spa as soon as that? Or
I think so, yeah. I mean, they're very quiet about it.
Do you see anyone closing that gap on McLaren?
It's hard to see them not continuing to be at the front. That said, if a team like Ferrari, which does have that kind of room to improve, takes a big step, they could do it, although I wouldn't hold my breath on that. But I think McLaren will still win more often than they don't in the second half of the year. They've got a very, very good car. And most importantly, as I've been talking about all year, it's great on the tyres in races. So they just have that race pace, even when it's tight in qualifying, which it has been.
Because you get these periods of dominance. We had Red Bull, then Mercedes, Red Bull again, now McLaren. With Red Bull, it weren't someone who were complacent just because they were leading, in your view, were they?
I don't think it was complacency. You always hear talk about development directions, and a good car is all relative, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You could take a car that's at the back right now and put it in F1 a few years ago, and it's an all-time classic car because it's so competitive, because there's this constant progress. So you do also get certain development directions that start to sort of top out, if you like. You hit sort of various local maximums. You'll hear them talking about just a concept that works really well. And then if somebody else has got a slightly better car concept, slightly better ideas, they can push on. And I think Red Bull have kind of gone down a little bit of a cul-de-sac they've been trying to back their way out of without losing pace. We've heard Max talking about how he doesn't like the balance of the car, the understeer limitation that kicks in sometimes. And that was there even when they were winning every race a couple of years ago. You've heard them talking about this endlessly. So I don't think it's complacency, because when your car is performing and you're delivering, you continue down that path, don't you?
Yeah.
And then everything's got a theoretical maximum. But then you discover someone else has got an approach that's different, and it's difficult to roll back. I do think maybe they've been a little bit overconfident in the corrective action they can take. Pierre Vacher, the technical director, I remember in an interview with one of my colleagues, said at the start of the year they've kind of 25% fixed the problem. And I think they felt they could fix more of it. So maybe they need to take a few more steps back. I wouldn't call that complacency. But
just the direction they went in, or
exactly, you make your choices, and it's Formula One's so fast moving, but it's also, in terms of the development, it's like stopping and turning around a juggernaut, really, because there's so much lag in the system and there's just so much legwork you've got to do. So let's say you could say tomorrow to Red Bull, right, this is the optimum sort of base car direction for this. You put it in the windside and it'd be way slower than the current car. And you've just got to go through all that grind. So that's why you can't change it just like that. So, yeah, I think Red Bull had confidence in the direction with good reason. They've had a lot of success, but now they've just got a car that can only win on its day, if you like, rather than every day.
The Red Bull car, everyone talks about how hard a car it is to drive, and Max can master it. What is so difficult about that car? What makes it so hard that a Liam Lawson or a Yuki Tsunoda, or at the end of his time there, Sergio Checo Perez couldn't sort of get to grips with it?
There's effectively two components to it. One of them is what Verstappen can do, which is that sort of very strong pointy front end. So you get that sort of very rapid turn-in, and that has a certain degree of rear instability. And if you can handle that, and you can turn in, like, think about a shopping trolley, just turning just like that, but you can turn it aggressively and control exactly
the point
where it stops, so you're not over rotating and you've got confidence, then you can be really quick. That'll be quicker than anything, because you've got the ability to do things. There's no limitation other than your tolerance as a driver to it. And there's a position where Verstappen wouldn't be able to handle that, because it would be
too much
beyond what human reaction and control could do. But sometimes talk about driving styles, and part of driving styles is tolerances. So like Alex Albon, when he's alongside Verstappen, he doesn't mind the car moving around on entry and being a bit unstable, but Verstappen's another step beyond that, and that pushes it into his danger zone. A driver who can do that, Michael Schumacher can do it. You can develop the car around that, because it's not so much, people talk about developing the car for Verstappen, and they sort of do, but it's a more kind of natural process than that, because you can make a car have more grip and theoretical performance, but it's impossible for a driver to drive it. But that also means you can do it that makes it impossible for, or very hard for, a number of drivers to drive it, but others to do so. So you push in that direction, and that's in a way, I think, hindered to an extent, because there's elements of that where Verstappen's covered over problems with the car, and that's sort of the second component, because it has a very narrow window, that car, as well. Sometimes it's understeery, and you need a driver who can try and provoke it a little bit to deal with that, and that makes it hard as well. So there's those two elements that interact. So it's both a car that has those Verstappen kind of tolerances used to build it, but also the things that Red Bull can't quite get right, that he's trying to drive round, and he's better at both of them. And then you've got a Yuki Tsunoda, who's a very capable driver, thinking, I'm really struggling to get to grips with this, and that's the problem. And it is hard, because it's really easy to say, well, make the car easier to drive, then both drivers can do it, but it'll be slower.
Yeah.
Now,
pushing the car in the direction they think is the quickest.
Exactly. Yeah, the Racing Bulls is a good car, quite neutral car, easier to drive, and it can beat the second Red Bull quite regularly. But Verstappen will be quicker in the Racing Bulls than he's in the Red Bull, because it's got a bit of an understanding. It's got a ceiling on it, so it's this fascinating three-dimensional thing, and it's actually really hard. Personally, I would say Red Bull's better approach would be you've either got to make sure you're developing drivers that can deal with that, which is hard, because that's one of the indicators of a proper great driver. Yeah. So you might say, well, maybe we need to deliberately make the Racing Bulls approach in a similar direction if you can achieve those characteristics. But also, do you just need to have better drivers, by which I mean established, proven drivers? If you throw a Charles Leclerc, say, in alongside him, he's going to be fine with it. He'll be able to do it, but he could be a problem.
I'm interested. So I've been lucky enough to be inside Red Bull for the season. There's sometimes a bit of a love and loathe perception of them from people. And I wonder, is that as simple as Max was the rival to Lewis Hamilton and he's now a rival to a Lando Norris or a George Russell or a Lewis Hamilton? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think that does happen, doesn't it? And everybody's got their own fan bases and drivers they like. And a good example from the past is Fernando Alonso, who was kind of certainly to say British fans, there was a period where to a lot of them he was the kind of enemy, wasn't he, of Lewis Hamilton. But then over time he became the kind of cult figure underdog who everyone or most people love. So that does make a big difference. And equally, Red Bull aren't afraid of being the bad guys or being perceived as the bad guys. They'll push everything to the limit.
Don't you?
Well, so I always say in Formula One, just again coming back to the idea of legality, you don't have to have a legal car in Formula One. You have to have a not illegal car.
Yeah, right.
And it's semantics really, but it's not that you're hiding things that are illegal. It's just you're doing things that aren't necessarily intended to be illegal, but actually are.
Yeah.
Because of the way the rules are written. Adrian Newey has said there's no such thing as the spirit of the regulations. So they push everything, and they push hard. They're not afraid to launch frustrating protests like we had in Canada, which kept everyone at the track late.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that sometimes people interpret as being sore losers. But you don't win in Formula One without being a sore loser.
It's just ultra competitive.
Exactly.
Just pushing everything to as far as you can. Now, with Max, what makes him so brilliant? I mean, is to your mind, is he the best driver in Formula One currently?
Yeah, I think there's no question of that. He's an all-time great. He does things that he does things on a regular basis that basically no other driver can do so consistently. I mean, he's obviously very quick, but he's just sort of this relentless racing machine, and people will hear that with how hard he is on the team as well. Those who watch practice sessions will always hear him moaning about upshifts and this isn't right, talking about
undrivable.
Exactly, yeah. But that's because he wants everything to be right, because he knows, he's learned that from an early age. Things have to be right, and then the driver does everything. And 99% of the time, he does absolutely everything he possibly can. I don't think there's any driver who would have got the results out of a Red Bull that he probably has over the past 12 months. There's a few who might have been able to do something in the same ballpark, something similar, but not very many. So it's not just that he's incredibly quick, it's because he's just so competitive. He'll push everything to the limit. And again, that's one of the reasons I think some people maybe don't take to Red Bull, because they see Max Verstappen as not being a gentlemanly driver, for want of a better word. But that's a very subjective perception. I always think you've got the rules. It's up to you how you play them. Everyone will do it differently. And if I was a Formula One driver by some miracle, I probably wouldn't go as far as Max Verstappen. I wouldn't want to. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily problematic or objectively wrong, if you see what I mean. So again, it's just pushing to extremes at every possible opportunity, on top of just having all of that ability and work. I hesitate to use the word talent because I think it's a bit reductive. It's skills that have been honed relentlessly over
a very young age.
Exactly. From the very first day he sat in a car, and for better or worse, how hard he was pushed by Jos Verstappen. As far as I know, there's criticism of that, but it's not really whether it's good or bad. That's his history. That is what happened, and it's played its part.
What about the standout driver then from this season? It's sort of, is it obvious? Or?
Yeah, I think it has to be Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
George Russell's been very good as well, but Max Verstappen, I think,
what he's doing in that car that other people can't seem to do.
Exactly. I mean, he's a phenomenally good driver, and you see this at times in F1 history. Yeah. I always say, all-time great drivers can make very good Grand Prix drivers look terrible. And we've seen it with people alongside Michael Schumacher in the past, for example. Ayrton Senna, anyone that good can just make you look ordinary. And the people who've been his teammate at Red Bull over the recent years, none of them are mugs. They're very, very good, capable drivers, but it's very tricky to match him, especially in a tough car. So you look at things like Suzuka. I don't think anybody else is winning Suzuka.
That was bonkers. Is that the best lap this season? That's the
pole lap, I'd say. Yeah. If you look at it, it's a really kind of. It's a kind of lap where there's bits of it where he's kind of provoking the car and reacting to it, and normally that's not a good thing, but that's the way he had to get the pace out of it, and he basically parked a less good car in front of the two McLarens and just sat there all race.
And you saw on the pit wall, it was like head blown, wasn't it? Like Pierre and Christian didn't expect that to happen. I loved that genuine surprise from them as well.
Absolutely, and similar at Silverstone. Not quite so special a lap, but a very good lap as well. And that's what Verstappen does for you, and all these moments. Ambushing Piastri on the first lap in Imola to win the Grand Prix. Piastri thought he was safe from attack there because Verstappen was so far back.
That was quite a bold move.
Exactly, and those are the things that a great driver can do, as well as just being generally very fast, very good, able to get the pace out of the car. He will also take those opportunities, and that's what's been so impressive. He's made a few mistakes. Silverstone was the obvious one, but
it was odd to see him. It's sort of rare to have those mistakes, a spin like that. You just sort of don't expect it from him.
Exactly. I guess everyone makes mistakes, and mistakes are easier to make when it's a bit of a battle. Let's put it that way. So, it's the reason why any team in Formula One would want Max Verstappen. Frankly, he is that good.
If you picked a rookie of the year, I think I'd probably lean to an Isaac Hadjar, but I mean, others have had their moments as well. I don't know who you'd go for.
I probably would go for Hadjar overall. I mean, there've been a number of them. Antonelli has been good, but I haven't quite, a bit inconsistent. I haven't quite seen that searing turn of speed yet, but that's with very high expectations. I'm sure it'll come. He will have some great moments. He had a great race in Canada. And then you have someone like Ollie Behrman, who obviously did a few races last year, but gets counted as a rookie, who's been very quick, but also a little bit frustrating. So Hadjar's probably the one, and partly it comes down to the fact that expectations were low. Red Bull's own expectations were low because they almost put him in the car because he was just the only one they had.
Marco admitted that he'd exceeded expectations.
Exactly. So expectations does play into it, but I think what Hadjar's done, particularly after that start in Australia, where he didn't start because he crashed on the formation lap.
And in tears. Gosh, that seems so long ago, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But when you're talking about a driver that there's reservations about his approach and whether he's kind of mentally robust enough, almost, then they do something like that, you think, oh no, this could spike.
Well, then the way he bounced back and recovered and turned around has been astonishing.
Yeah. So he's probably been the most impressive overall, but it's still a question that's up for debate in the second half of the year as to who will come through and sort of take the sort of notional rookie of the year honours. But it's always a matter of opinion, that.
Well, the way Kick Sauber are going, Bortoleto could get himself in the mix if they can continue on this crazy trajectory.
Yeah, he's been properly good, Bortoleto. And although Hülkenberg's got all the headlines pretty much, there have been ones, the Spanish Grand Prix where Hülkenberg finished fifth. If the strategy goes a different way, Bortoleto could have been the guy that got the good result there. Yeah. He was very quick though. He's made a few mistakes like rookies will, but I've been impressed with Bortoleto as well. So it's a good crop. This could be one of those ones you look back on in 10 years' time and think, wow, that was a classic crop of rookies.
That's cool. You talk about the crop of rookies. What about Brits? Is it golden era for Brits? Like, I know we've had a lot of great British drivers, but there seems to be some very talented ones on the grid at the moment.
Yeah, I struggle to use golden era just because it's so sort of normal. Right. Because British drivers have been at the forefront of Grand Prix racing for a long time. It wasn't always so, but sort of 50s onwards, kind of as you push in towards the end of the 50s and you get, Mike Hawthorne and Sterling Moss, Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart, James Hunt, there's kind of this constant stream of British drivers. So it's not unusual in that regard, but at the same time, we do have British drivers in 3 of the top seats. Yep. So that is slightly unusual. So you can justify that as a golden era. And British drivers have certain, I don't want to use the word advantages necessarily, but because there is so much motorsport in Britain, and Britain traditionally has had a bit more cash to invest in drivers, so that's sort of gradually shifting as sort of the economics of the world change a bit. That means there's a lot of drivers who get the opportunity and then they get battle hardened, and the best that come through are going to be very, very good. Yes. So there's certain advantages there, but there is this kind of, I guess, special crop of them. And the fact Hamilton has hung around for so long, hung around is perhaps not the right phrase, but he's still going, still willing to put that effort in, even though it's not been going so well recently, means you've got someone who, in a normal scheme of things, you'd have thought would have retired by now, who's still there while George Russell's there and Lando Norris is there. So, it's interesting from that regard. So if for British fans at Silverstone, if they want to see a home driver, then there's lots to choose from. It seems Lando Norris is the most popular.
Yeah, he really does. It seems to have risen. I guess if Lewis was in a competitive, when I say competitive, a race-winning Ferrari, maybe it would be different.
Yeah, that's probably true. It was interesting, though. Again, this is a very, very sort of subjective measure, but wandering around at Silverstone recently, you see loads of papaya McLaren bits of kit, and part of that is McLaren fans, because McLaren have built up that brand well. You saw an amount of Ferrari, and the amount of Mercedes has plummeted, even though they've got George Russell there.
That was noticeable. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, I really did see that this weekend.
So I wonder if George Russell isn't sort of resonating in the same way.
Maybe he needs time because it's not been his team; it was Lewis's team. He was the fulcrum of it, and he's building that. I really like what George is doing, and I think he'll become a champion probably in the future. I guess
he's on that trajectory, and I think he's taken a good step this year as well. Consistently fast, and success breeds popularity, doesn't it? And if you went Silverstone a couple of years ago, there wouldn't have been the same popularity for Lando Norris, who did have a profile, certainly. So it's always interesting to see who people get behind. And it seems like Norris's time at the moment among the British fans,
definitely true.
But generally most it's Verstappen fans. They're the most common denominator around the world, aren't they? It's normally a sea of orange rather than
in Austria. The sea of orange. It was incredible.
Yeah.
The amount there. If I was to ask your best team from this season, it probably wouldn't be Alpine. I'm trying to think. Is it McLaren? Is it as obvious as that because of what they've done, or would you mention some others?
I think it probably has to be McLaren, yes. And I like the fact they've not won every race they could have done, but they've got a good strike rate. They've been quite assured.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, certainly in the top 4 teams, they're the clear standout. And then the game's a little bit different when it gets to down the order, isn't it, in terms of what you're looking for?
Well, outside of those top 4, then is there a team that's particularly impressed you? Then,
well, actually, I'm going to say something a few months ago I wouldn't have thought I'd say, and say Sauber.
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
Yeah,
but they were dreadful to start with, weren't they? And they've since Barcelona basically they brought in the upgrade there, and that seems to have had the effect, hasn't it?
Yeah,
big effect.
When that team's had a lot of trouble over the past few years. They only scored points once last year, and then testing the car looked horrible.
Yeah,
watching on track, sort of stiff all over the place, just slow.
Like the absolute back marker, didn't it? When you're seeing you like
it looked like you had the front group of 4, then the midfield, and then Sauber.
Yeah.
But having said that, I remember going to Australia, watching the first session. I do quite a lot of sort of trackside watching because you can see what the car's doing there. And there's lots of different sort of sources of information for how good a car is, and that's always good. And you could see straight away it taking a step. They bought some new parts, so they kind of got back marker respectability immediately and could just nip the odd car into Q2, which still wasn't anything stunning. But yeah, that Spain upgrade, it's not just made the car have more downforce and performance, but it's just made it more consistent to drive, so the drivers can get more out of it.
We've got a bit of a break until the next race, but if you were to pick a 1, 2, 3, a podium for the next race in Spa, what would you go for?
I think I'd go for. I mean, Red Bull should be strong at Spa.
Yeah,
that should
strong enough to catch the McLarens, or
you'd still start to look towards McLaren. I think ultimately that's just your default, isn't it? It could be quite cool at Spa, so I'm interested to see how.
So the tyres won't be as much of an issue then for Red Bull there.
Good for Mercedes, good for Red Bull, but it depends on conditions because Spa's a tricky one. It can be raining, it can be freezing, it can be very, very hot, and that changes the game. And Ferrari could be in there, so I've massively hedged there. So I would still go with McLaren. Probably a couple of McLarens and Verstappen would be my.
And would it be switch around in the McLarens from the last race? Would you have Piastri winning over Lando, or
it's a coin toss at the moment? That's the great thing about this battle, isn't it? That I think the tendency that everybody kind of wants to see what the pattern is and who the kind of winner is before it's played out. And there was a period where Piastri was absolutely in the ascendancy and he kind of took over title favourite status. And then Norris over the last couple of weekends after that nadir
I love it.
in Canada has had back-to-back victories. So it really could be either.
Do you see that relationship crumbling at all? Like, is there any signs of that? We're only halfway through and they've managed to hold it together pretty well as a team despite some adversity.
I feel it needs a proper flashpoint.
So your actual proper coming together where someone's sort of nearly had it, but then landed when he drove into Oscar in Canada, and then he was like, "Oh, sorry, everyone, my fault."
Well,
polite.
Well, Lando got that so spectacularly wrong. Even the most blinkered F1 driver, who aren't famous for the most objective views of things,
saying that Oscar had done anything wrong there. Yeah.
Exactly, and Oscar would have been secretly delighted that had happened because it didn't compromise his result at all, but it did compromise his rival. So I'm sure he had a chuckle in his helmet as that was happening. But yeah, you'll need something with somebody completely disregarding a team order or driving into the other.
It could happen, couldn't it?
Well, if you keep battling constantly,
and they're that close.
Yeah, and I think I do think those two genuinely want to try and keep the peace. They both talk about the fact we're going to be here for a lot of years. Yeah. It's not just the 2025 championship, it's 26, 27. So they don't want to burn bridges.
It's a different way of going racing, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. But there sometimes comes a point where, and I've asked drivers about this, where your objectives and the team's objectives, because the team just wants 1-2s.
Become different.
Yeah, and there is a bit of a difference because
particularly as you get into the business end of the season.
Yeah. Mostly teams, if they get a 1-2, they really don't care what order it is.
That's fun, isn't it?
But if you're 2, you very much care that you are the P1, and it's that competition when you're definitely going to win that comes with risk that teams would rather not happen. So there could very well come a time, and they both know this. I think Norris knows it as well. Remember what he thought about in Hungary last year when he kind of got given the lead because they shuffled the pit stop order to protect the 1-2. And he was definitely thinking about not doing it,
Yeah.
not giving it.
Yeah, that went on for a few laps, didn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. He thought about it for a very, very long time. I suspect he thought this probably isn't the time to do this. But that showed
there will be a time.
Yeah. And I think Norris, he's a great team player, but he'll be willing to do it. Piastri will certainly be willing to do it. So it's down to circumstances, and it's how they react to it. I do like the approach McLaren had taken.
Me too, but I do want a bit of beef between them.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We're all waiting for it to have that. That's what always happens when there's a really close title fight.
What's the best beef on the track? Is it Max v George? That seems a genuine dislike, does it?
Absolutely, yeah. They're very different characters, aren't they?
I think that's at the core of it, isn't it? That they are such different human beings.
Exactly, yeah. George Russell's very he's British public schoolboy head boy, isn't he?
Really is.
Max Verstappen's much more sort of rough and ready. Again, no right and wrong in terms of how they should be, but they're different people. They get on okay, actually. They're
quite civil to each other off the track.
Exactly, yeah. They're not sort of
not at loggerheads the whole time as you might.
Exactly. But what I like is that Russell has very calculatedly taken this approach of trying to draw lines in the sand. Back end of last year in Abu Dhabi, he was criticising Verstappen, saying, he bullies other drivers.
Has he got in his head more than other? Has George got in Max's head more than others? It doesn't normally happen, I don't think. I just think there is a little bit there.
Yeah, I think there is. Remember in Canada, where George Russell, after getting pole, just made that quip about, I've got more license penalty points to play with, because there was that 2-race period where Verstappen could have got a ban for a trivial.
Good little dig, isn't it?
And it was, and Verstappen was quite chippy about it in the press conference after. It wasn't emphatically clear whether he was annoyed at what Russell had said, which he did here, or just everybody asking about it. But I think he was annoyed with Russell, and George Russell will be looking at that and thinking, okay, it's the only relative weakness in Max Verstappen's armoury, actually.
Yeah.
And I think if you're Russell, you think, right, I'm going to needle him a bit. I'm going to tell him I'm not going to back down on track, and I'm going to be the one that he's thinking about. That could spectacularly backfire on George Russell, but it's also the right approach to take. I understand why he's done it, because there's a psychological battle as well. And Russell absolutely thinks he's the guy who can beat Max Verstappen.
I love that.
There's no question about that. He will be certain. And Verstappen's probably sitting there thinking, in the same car, I'm a few tenths quicker than you.
It'd be fun to see them in the same car, wouldn't it? In the same team. I just don't think it can happen, can it?
Yeah, they're not an obvious teammate pair. You never know. But yeah, I think it'd be fascinating to see a championship fight between those two.
Ed, thanks very much for joining us and for your insights on all things Red Bull and otherwise.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
The Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, a commercial company that's wholly owned by the BBC. Video editing and social media is by Georgina Revel. James Cook is the executive producer.